I am a father of two children. I truly loved my wife and worked harder than anyone to protect my family. But the wife I trusted committed something unimaginable with a male employee I had hired. That day, an unexpected and shocking truth unfolded before my eyes. I couldn't believe it, but the moment I witnessed it myself, my entire life crumbled. Now, let me tell you my story that will shake your perception of what you think you know. My wife and I first met while studying at dental school. When I first saw her, who had just joined our university club, my gaze unconsciously lingered on her. With her graceful appearance, elegant demeanor, and captivating eyes, it felt like my heart skipped a beat. To my surprise, she also had a good impression of me. The fact that we both grew up in difficult family environments quickly brought our hearts closer together. I was raised by a single mother who endured many hardships raising me alone. Thanks to her silent perseverance, I was able to focus on my studies and eventually enroll in dental school. With scholarships and support from relatives, I managed to cover my tuition fees, but deep inside, I always vowed to succeed and give my mother the life she deserved. My wife, although she had both parents, grew up in a household far from harmonious. Her mother was financially dependent on her father and constantly expressed resentment and complaints. Witnessing this, my wife vowed from a young age to never rely on a man and to live independently. That's why she chose to pursue a career in dentistry not just as a job, but as a means to achieve her independence. She disliked depending on her parents financially, so she worked various part time jobs to pay for her tuition. To earn higher wages, she took jobs at nightclubs and upscale hotel lounges. After long days of studying, she would head to work at night, yet she never showed signs of exhaustion. Watching her resilience made my heart ache, and I wanted to support her in any way I could. As time passed, we became each other's solace, sharing our dreams for the future. After long, tiring days, sitting together over coffee and talking about our future warmed my heart, as if the world consisted of just the two of us. Perhaps those days when we endured dental school together while supporting each other's dreams were the purest moments of my life. However, something unexpected happened. Just before graduation, my wife discovered she was pregnant. When I first heard the news, my mind went blank. I was still an intern with no stable income, and my wife was facing the challenges of final exams and national board exams. The situation seemed overwhelming, but after a long night of deliberation, we decided to have the baby. Even though the road ahead would be tough, we believed we could endure it together. We registered our marriage and became husband and wife, relying on each other more than ever. Despite being pregnant, my wife never stopped studying and ultimately passed both her graduation exams and the national licensing exam with excellent scores. Her determination made me proud. But reality proved to be more challenging than expected. Balancing work and childcare was not as easy as it sounded. Since her relationship with her mother was strained, there was no one to help with childcare. Eventually, my wife decided to pause her career to care for our children. However, what was meant to be a temporary break stretched longer than anticipated, especially after our second child was born close in age to the first. My wife gradually drifted further from her profession and began to lose confidence in her skills. Seeing her struggle, I made a significant decision. I took out a large loan to open my own dental clinic. Watching my long held dream come true felt surreal, but reality was harsh. Simply opening a clinic didn't guarantee patients would come. Monthly loan payments and living expenses became a heavy burden, and tensions between us rose, leading to frequent arguments over minor issues. One night, my wife quietly said, "Maybe I should have never stopped working. If I had continued my career, we wouldn't be struggling like this." Her voice was filled with guilt and regret. Given that she had outperformed me academically during college, she might have wondered if she could have been more successful had she continued her career. But hearing those words weighed heavily on my heart because she had made that sacrifice for the sake of our family. Our conversations grew increasingly sharp and filled with unspoken resentment. Her words, "I should have never given up my career," echoed in my mind, creating a wedge between us that grew deeper over time. I often reminisced about our early days, how we used to hold hands and dream together. Her eyes, which once radiated love and hope, now reflected only regret and sorrow, and that hurt me the most. However, I refused to give up. This family was something we had built together, and I believed that if we faced our challenges head on, we could overcome them. Determined to shoulder the burden for both of us, I threw myself into work. I treated patients nonstop during the day and spent nights devising treatment plans and business strategies, sacrificing sleep to keep the clinic afloat. Fortunately, with time, the number of patients gradually increased. Since dental treatments often involve high cost procedures, our income steadily grew. Once the clinic's reputation spread and we established a loyal patient base, our financial situation improved dramatically. The bank account that once seemed empty began to fill up, and before long we had paid off the entire loan. A sense of relief washed over me, as if the heavy weight I had carried for years had finally been lifted. I was now able to provide my mother, the woman who had sacrificed so much to raise me, with a comfortable life in a new home. Seeing her finally at peace brought tears to my eyes. I also repaid the relatives who had supported me during my studies, grateful for their help in my time of need. At last, I felt I could stand tall without the burden of financial worries. However, just when I thought peace had returned to our family, my wife still seemed to carry an unfulfilled void in her heart. While she appreciated that we were no longer struggling financially, she would occasionally sigh and murmur to herself, "In the end, I ended up living a life dependent on my husband, just like my mother." Her voice was tinged with bitterness and self reproach. Although she didn't regret raising our children, she couldn't help but feel that she had strayed far from the independent life she had once dreamed of. For someone who had excelled academically in college, giving up her dream of becoming a dentist left a scar that never fully healed. Unfortunately, I failed to fully understand her feelings. Occasionally, I would say, "Thanks to you, our family is stable now and the clinic is doing well." I would pat her shoulder, hoping to offer comfort, but my words lacked the deeper empathy she needed. Caught up in the demands of running the clinic, I often felt that even conversations with my family were a luxury I couldn't afford. As a result, the emptiness in my wife's heart grew deeper and more pronounced. Her lifestyle began to change. At first, it was just the occasional purchase of designer clothes or cosmetics, but over time, the frequency and cost of these indulgences increased. Expensive handbags and jewelry from luxury brands gradually filled her wardrobe, and overseas trips became a regular occurrence. It was as if she was trying to make up for all the years of self denial. I never tried to stop her. On the contrary, I thought, as long as I work hard and provide for her, it's fine. If this makes her happy, then that's enough. I convinced myself that this was the least I could do for her. However, money couldn't solve everything. No matter how much she spent, the emptiness in her heart remained. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, my wife cautiously brought up a topic that caught me off guard. "Now that the kids are older, I'd like to start working at the clinic again." I paused, my hand gripping the spoon. Wouldn't the staff feel uncomfortable with the boss's wife working there? "I'm not planning to boss anyone around. I just want to learn and help where I can. Besides, I'm confident I can provide great care to patients. And if I can help with the clinic's management, you can focus more on treating patients, right?" There was a spark of life in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. It was clear that the passion she had suppressed for so long was reigniting. After some hesitation, I nodded. Perhaps having her assist with clinic operations would benefit both the business and her sense of fulfillment. From the very first day, my wife approached her work with passion and enthusiasm. Her warm smile and kind demeanor immediately won over our patients, particularly older adults and female patients who found it easier to open up to her. Her explanations eased the anxieties of hesitant patients, which improved our clinic's reputation and naturally boosted our revenue. However, not everyone welcomed the changes. While the male employees didn't seem to mind her presence, some female staff members felt uncomfortable with her proactive approach. When my wife began getting involved in consultations and appointment scheduling, some employees felt that their roles were being encroached upon. Still, I was too focused on the clinic's growing success to worry about those issues. Besides, our clinic manager, Mr. Kim, who had been with us since the clinic's early days, maintained a good working relationship with my wife. As the clinic's main administrator, he handled operations efficiently, allowing me to focus on patient care. Occasionally, he would bring important documents to our home for me to sign, so he was familiar with my wife as well. Unbeknownst to me, however, this seemingly smooth collaboration was concealing a dangerous secret. One day, a longtime dental hygienist who had been with us since the clinic's inception announced that she was resigning after a heated argument with my wife. Her departure was a significant blow as she was a skilled and reliable employee. I tried to persuade my wife to resolve the situation. She's been with us for a long time. Maybe you could talk things over and try to work it out. But my wife's expression hardened. You have no idea how much I've put up with. I've overheard those women gossiping about me behind my back more times than I can count. I tried to ignore it, but I can't take it anymore. Just because I'm the boss's wife doesn't mean I have to tolerate their disrespect. Her voice trembled with suppressed frustration. I could tell that the stress and loneliness she had experienced at the clinic had taken a toll on her. Still, I couldn't help but wonder if losing a valuable employee was worth it. Yet my wife remained adamant. Ultimately, the dental hygienist left the clinic and I reluctantly agreed to hire a replacement. Life at the clinic seemed to return to normal. But one evening after my wife left work early, something happened that reignited my suspicions. As I pulled into the apartment complex's parking lot, I noticed a familiar gray sedan. My heart skipped a beat as I recalled the owner, Mr. Kim. However, before I could get a closer look, the car drove off. At first, I dismissed the thought, but something about the encounter lingered in my mind. I tried to brush it off as coincidence, but a faint sense of unease settled in my chest. Later that night, as I entered the apartment, I casually mentioned it to my wife. I think I saw Mr. Kim in the parking lot earlier. Her hand froze momentarily before she turned around, her expression calm and composed. Really? Why would he be here? I don't know. Maybe I was mistaken. She tilted her head as if trying to remember something. Oh, right. I think he mentioned having a friend who lives in this complex. I'm not sure, though. That's the first I've heard of it, I replied, raising an eyebrow. Well, you and Mr. Kim only talk about work. But since I help with the clinic's operations, we chat about all sorts of things sometimes. Maybe that's how I heard it. Her response seemed reasonable, and the tension in my chest eased slightly. But that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the memory of the gray sedan. The words of the former dental hygienist echoed in my mind. There's something suspicious about Mr. Kim and your wife. Be careful, doctor. The next few months passed without incident until I had to attend a dental conference in the United States. I decided to close the clinic for a week and encouraged my wife to use the time to relax or take the kids on a trip. She seemed genuinely pleased with the opportunity to have some time to herself. The conference ended earlier than expected, and after considering a few extra days of sightseeing, I decided to return home. I missed my family, and the thought of surprising them made me smile. After landing, I took a taxi home, my heart light with anticipation. As I stepped into the apartment building, excitement built up inside me. I imagined the joy on my children's faces when they saw the gifts I had brought. I punched in the security code, and as the door unlocked with a familiar click, I quietly stepped inside. Then I froze. On the floor near the entrance lay a pair of unfamiliar men's shoes, black leather loafers that gleamed under the hallway light. They weren't mine, and they were too large for my children. My heart pounded in my chest. I scanned the living room, but no one was there. Yet something felt off. The air itself seemed different, as if the room was holding its breath. Then, faint but unmistakable sounds reached my ears, soft moans and the rhythmic creaking of a mattress. My mind screamed, "No, it can't be." Every muscle in my body tensed as my pulse thundered in my ears. My hands trembled as I clenched my fists, torn between the urge to storm into the bedroom and the voice in my head urging restraint. Acting impulsively wouldn't solve anything. I needed proof. Swallowing my rage, I quietly stepped back outside, closing the door behind me with a trembling hand. I forced myself to breathe deeply, trying to suppress the storm of emotions raging within me. Then I headed to the parking lot. My eyes scanned the rows of parked cars until they landed on a familiar gray sedan. My heart dropped as I read the license plate. Mr. Kim. Suddenly everything clicked. The former employee's warning, the chance encounter in the parking lot, my wife's nonchalant reaction, it all made sense now. A wave of nausea washed over me as the full extent of their betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. Yet instead of charging back into the apartment, I forced myself to stay calm. Confronting them now would only lead to a heated argument. I needed undeniable evidence to expose their affair and secure the upper hand. Driving to the clinic, I pushed aside my emotions and focused on what needed to be done. Once inside my office, I turned on the computer and began reviewing the clinic's financial records. At first glance, nothing seemed amiss. But as I meticulously compared several years' worth of documents, irregularities began to emerge. Repeated disappearances of funds, vague expense reports, and payments sent to an unfamiliar account. My pulse quickened as I recognized Mr. Kim's name in multiple suspicious transactions. Under the guise of payroll and operational expenses, he had been siphoning money from the clinic. Worse still, the frequency of these transactions increased after my wife began working at the clinic. With shaking hands, I gathered all the evidence and placed it in a folder. Sitting back in my chair, I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. The betrayal of my wife and the man I had trusted to help run my clinic cut deeper than I could have ever imagined. But now was not the time for grief. It was time to act. I hired a forensic accountant to review the clinic's financials, and their findings confirmed what I had suspected: multiple instances of embezzlement involving both my wife and Mr. Kim. I also consulted an attorney who advised me to gather concrete evidence of the affair, as it would strengthen my case in divorce proceedings. A few days later, I casually told my wife, "I'm going camping with some friends this weekend. Just a short trip to relax." Her smile seemed a little too bright. "That sounds great. You've been working so hard lately. You deserve a break." Her cheerful response only fueled my determination. I knew she and Mr. Kim would seize the opportunity to meet again. On the night of the so-called camping trip, I parked near the apartment complex and waited. The hours dragged on, but I remained patient. Finally, a familiar gray sedan appeared, pulling into the parking lot with deliberate slowness. "Mr. Kim stepped out, glancing around nervously before heading toward the apartment building. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as adrenaline coursed through my veins. This is it, I thought. After waiting long enough to ensure they were inside, I exited my car and approached the apartment. My heart pounded in my chest as I entered the building and stood outside the door, my hand hovering over the keypad. Each digit beeped softly as I entered the code. The door swung open and I stepped inside, phone in hand and recording. Muffled sounds filtered through the closed bedroom door, whispers, soft moans, the faint creak of the mattress. The air felt heavy with anticipation. Clenching my jaw, I gripped the doorknob, took a deep breath, and flung the door open. What the hell do you think you're doing? The scene that greeted me was burned into my memory, the tangled sheets, the look of shock on my wife's face, and Mr. Kim scrambling to cover himself. Don't bother making excuses. I've got everything on video. Mr. Kim collapsed onto the floor, stammering incoherently. Dr. Lee, this isn't what it looks like. Shut up, I barked. You think I don't know what you've been doing. I know about the money you stole. You're finished. My wife clutched the sheets to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Please, I'm sorry, it was a mistake, just one mistake, please forgive me. Her tearful pleas fell on deaf ears. A mistake? Do you think I'm stupid? How many nights have you spent like this while I was working to provide for this family? And you think I'll forgive you after you stole from me too? Her sobs filled the room, but my heart had already hardened. Without another word, I stopped recording and left the room. In the following weeks, everything moved swiftly. The evidence I had gathered, the financial records, the forensic accountant's report, the video recording was all presented in court. The judge ruled in my favor. My wife's infidelity and her involvement in the embezzlement meant she received minimal,